Hi everyone, welcome back to another video from Codehal. In this video, we will create a full-stack login and register form with user and admin pages using HTML, CSS, PHP, and MySQL database. Here you can see a login form that has two input fields, namely email and password, a login button, and a link to go to the registration form. When we click this register link, the login form will be hidden and the register form will appear. In this register form, there are four input fields, namely name, email, password, and one drop-down to select a role as a user or admin. After that, there is a register button and a link to return to the login form. When we click this login link, the register form will be hidden and the login form will appear. Now, we will try the registration process. First, we will select the role as a user and use this email. After all input fields are filled, we click the register button, and we will be directly redirected to the login form. The data we entered, such as name, email, encrypted password, and role, will be saved in the MySQL database. If we try to register with the same email, an error message will appear with the text, "Email is already registered," and the data will not be added to the database. This ensures that each email can only be used once. Now let's register again using a different email. And this time, we will select the role as an admin. After successfully registering, we will be redirected to the login form, and new data with a different email will be saved in the database. Next, we will try the login process for these two accounts, each having different roles, namely as a user and an admin. If we enter the wrong email or password, an error message will appear, "Incorrect email or password." If the data is correct and we log in using the user account, we will be directed to the user page, and on this page, the name of the currently logged in user will be displayed. There is an explanatory text stating that this is the user page, and there is a logout button to log out of the account. This page is just an example. You can make it better according to your needs. Then if we click this logout button, the system will immediately redirect us back to the login page. Now let's try logging in with the second account, which is the admin account. After successfully logging in, we will be directed to the admin page, which also displays the name of the currently logged in user. Similar to the user page, there is a logout button to log out of the account. If we click the logout button, the system will also immediately redirect us back to the login page. Now if we try to access the admin page directly through the URL without logging in first, the system will deny access and automatically redirect us to the login page. Likewise, if we try to directly access the user page, the system will also deny access because we have not logged in. This ensures that only logged-in users can access those pages according to their roles. Alright, let's start creating the full-stack login and register form with user and admin pages using HTML, CSS, PHP, and MySQL database. But before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel Codehal so you won't miss other interesting videos. And now let's get started. Here, I have prepared a folder containing one HTML file and one CSS file. Next, I will open these files using my code editor, Visual Studio Code. However, you are free to use any code editor of your choice based on your preference. This is the HTML file I have prepared with a basic HTML structure. I have also added a link tag to connect this HTML file with the style.css file. Then here is the CSS file. Inside, I have imported fonts from Google Fonts and added some CSS properties, such as margin, padding, box sizing, and font family. These properties are applied to all HTML elements using the universal selector. If you want to use this initial setup, I have provided a download link in the video description. You can download it directly and follow the steps in this video. Next, we will run this project using the Live Server extension in Visual Studio Code. With Live Server, we can see changes directly in the browser without having to refresh the page manually. Currently, we see a blank page in the browser. This happens because the body section in our HTML file, which is responsible for displaying the main content of the page, is still empty. Now let's add some code inside the body tag to start building this project. First, we create a div element with the class container, which serves as the main wrapper. Inside this element, there is a div element with the class form box, which is used to wrap the login form. In the form box element, we add an ID attribute with the name login form. Inside the form box element, we add a form element. This form consists of several elements, namely, an H2 element with the text login as the form's title, input elements for email and password. Next, we add a button element with the text login. This button is used to submit the form data when clicked. Finally, we add a paragraph element containing a registration link. Now we can see the basic layout of the login form. Elements such as the title, inputs for email and password, the login button, and the registration link are already visible. However, the appearance is not attractive yet, since there is no styling. Next, we will add some CSS properties to style this form. First, we will add styling for the body element. Display flex to make all elements inside the body flexible for layout management. Justify content center and align items center to ensure the content inside the body is centered on the screen. Min height 100 viewport height to make the height of the body equal to the height of the viewport. Background linear gradient to add a gradient effect to the background. Color to set the main text color to dark gray. Then for the element with the class container, margin 0.15 pixels to add a horizontal margin of 15 pixels on the left and right sides to prevent the layout from being too close to the edges of the screen, while the top and bottom have no margin with a value of 0. This margin setting will be more noticeable on responsive layouts, or when the screen size is reduced. Next, for the element with the class form box, we add the following properties. Width 100% to ensure this element adjusts to the width of the container. Max width 450 pixels to limit the maximum width to 450 pixels. Padding 30 pixels to add spacing inside the element so its content doesn't stick to the edges. Background to set the background color to white. Border radius 10 pixels to give rounded corners to this element. Box shadow to add a soft shadow around the element. Now we can see that the login form is centered on the screen with a gradient background and looks neater with styling applied to the form box. Next, we will add styling for the form title and inputs. For the title element with the H2 tag, we add the following properties. Font size 34 pixels to set the text size larger. Text align center to center align the text. Margin bottom 20 pixels to add a 20 pixels bottom margin so it's not too close to the next element. Then for the input elements, width 100% to make the input width adjust to the width of its wrapper. Padding 12 pixels to add space inside the input for user comfort. Background to set a light gray background color. Border radius 6 pixels to make the input corners slightly rounded. Border none to remove the default border. Outline none to remove the black outline when the input is focused. Font size 16 pixels to set the text size inside the input. Color to set the text color to dark gray. Margin bottom 20 pixels to add spacing between inputs. After adding this styling, we can see a larger title and well-styled modern input fields. The login form is now starting to look more appealing. Next, we will style the login button, the paragraph element, and the registration link. We create styling for the button element. Width 100% to make the button as wide as the container element. Padding 12 pixels to add space inside the button. Background to set the button's background color. Border radius 6 pixels to make the button corners slightly rounded. Border none to remove the button's border. Cursor pointer to change the cursor to a pointer when hovering over the button. Font size 16 pixels to set the button text size. Color to set the text color to white. Font weight 500 to make the button text slightly bold. Margin bottom 20 pixels to add a bottom margin. Transition 0.5 seconds for a transition effect when hovering over the button. Next, we add a hover effect for the button element. Background to change the button's background color when hovered. We create styling for the P element. Font size 14.5 pixels for the text size. Text align center to center align the text. Margin bottom 10 pixels to add a bottom margin to the paragraph. Next, for the link element inside the P. Color to set the link text color. Text decoration none to remove the underline from the link text. Finally, we add a hover effect for the link element. Text decoration underline to display an underline when the link is hovered. Now we can see the button element styled as designed. The button looks more modern with white text and rounded corners. When we hover over the button, its color slightly darkens. The paragraph is centered, and the link has a different color from the paragraph text without an underline. When we hover over the link, an underline appears on the text. We have completed adding styling to the login form. The next step is to create elements for the registration form. To start, we can copy the div element with the formBox class along with all its child elements, then paste it here. Next, change the ID name to register form. Change the heading text to register. Add a new input element with the type text for the user's name field. Add a select drawdown element with several options, such as user and admin, to select a role. Update the name attribute value on the button to register, and change the button text to register. Adjust the paragraph text and link so that it points to the login page. After all the elements are added, we can see that the registration form looks the same as the login form. This form consists of a heading register, inputs for name, email, and password, a register button, text with a link to the login form, and a drop-down to select a role. However, this drop-down currently lacks styling, so we will add styling to ensure it looks uniform with the other elements. We only need to place the select element alongside the other input elements so that the default styling can be applied automatically. This way, the role drop-down will have the same appearance as the other input elements. Now the role drawdown has styling that matches the other input elements and looks much more appealing. After the styling is done, the next step is to hide the registration form so that the login form becomes the default view when users open the website. First, on the element with the formBox class, add the property display none. This property completely hides the element from the screen and does not take up space in the page layout. At this point, both the login and registration forms are hidden. Next, we will only display the login form by adding the active class to the login element. On the div element with the formBox class and the ID login form, we add the active class here. Then we will provide properties for the formBox class with the active class. Add the property display block. This property is used to display the element, so it can be seen and become the default view when users first open the website. So now the login form is visible and becomes a default view when users first open the website because we set the active class on the login form. Next, we will add interactivity so users can switch between the login and registration forms. We will use a bit of JavaScript to set this behavior. First, create a JavaScript file. Click New File, then name the file script.js. Make sure to link the JavaScript file to our HTML file. Write it before the closing body tag. Add the JavaScript file name we just created. Now we can start writing the JavaScript code here. Here, we create a function named showForm with one parameter called formID. The showForm function is used to display a specific form based on the form ID provided in the argument. The formID parameter is used to capture the ID of the form to be displayed. Inside the showForm function, we use the querySelectorAll method on the document object to select all HTML elements with the FormBox class. Then we use the forEach method to iterate through all these elements, and for each element, we remove the active class using the classless property with the remove method. Next, we select the element with the ID matching the formID parameter and add the active class to that element using the classless property with the add method. This way, only the form with the matching ID will be displayed. Next, in the HTML section on this register link, we add an onClick attribute to call the showForm function we created in the JavaScript file. Since we want to activate or display the registration form, we use the ID value of that form, which is registerForm, as the argument value for the showForm function. Similarly, for the login link, we add an onClick attribute that also calls the showForm function, but with a different argument value. In this case, the ID value of the login form, which is login form, is used as the argument value. Now notice this register link. If we click the register link, the register form will be activated and appear on the screen. The login form will be hidden because the active class on that form has been removed. Conversely, if we click the login link, the login form will become active and reappear on the screen, and the registration form will be hidden because the active class on that form has been removed. Now we have successfully added interactivity, so users can switch between the login and registration forms. The next step is to move into the backend section. First, close this tab. Then rename the file index.html to index.php. Files with the .php extension allow us to use PHP programming, which is required to connect to databases or utilize other PHP features. This change is essential for the server to recognize the file as a PHP file. After that, you can temporarily close the code editor, as we'll be moving the project folder to a new location. Here, I will be using XAMPP as a local server, but you are free to choose other software according to your preference. If you don't have this software installed, you can download and install it first. Now move our project folder into the htdocs folder located in the XAMPP installation directory. Open the XAMPP installation folder, then go to the htdocs folder and paste the project folder here. The htdocs folder is the default location where the Apache server reads project files. This ensures that our files can be accessed through the local server. After moving the project folder, reopen the code editor to continue development. Next, open the XAMPP application and start the Apache and MySQL modules by clicking the Start button for each module. The Apache module functions as the server to run PHP files, while MySQL is used to manage the project's database. Ensure both modules are running before proceeding to the next step. Once the modules are active, you can access the project through a browser by typing the address localhost/project folder name. In this case, my project folder name is login_register. This page will display the project interface through the local server. Make sure the project folder name matches what you type in the URL. Then press Enter to load it, and the server will automatically look for the default file in the requested directory. If the page loads successfully, you will see the login and register interface created in the default file, index.php. Next, since we don't have a database yet, we'll create one using MySQL with the help of PHP MyAdmin. To start, open a new tab in your browser. Type localhost/PHP MyAdmin and press Enter. Now we're on the PHP MyAdmin page. PHP MyAdmin is a web-based tool designed to simplify MySQL database management. Let's create a new database. Click the Databases tab at the top. Enter a database name in the database name field, for example, users_db. Then click the Create button. Once the database is successfully created, we'll create a table within it. Enter a table name in the table name field, for example, users, and specify the number of columns as 5. Then click the Create button to proceed. Next, configure the columns as follows. For the first column, name it ID. Use the data type integer to store numbers. Leave the length field empty. Set attributes to unsigned because IDs cannot be negative. For index, select primary to designate this column as a unique identifier and click Go. And check Auto Increment to automatically increase the ID value. For the second column, name it name. Use the data type varchar to store text. Set the length to 255, which is sufficient to store most names without overloading the database storage. For the third column, name it email. Use the data type varchar and set the length to 255. For index, select unique to prevent duplicate email entries. Name it email unique and click Go. For the fourth column, name it password. Use the data type varchar and set the length to 255. This will store hash passwords. For the last column, name it role. Use the data type enum to define fixed values for this column, such as user and admin. For values, enter user and admin, using single quotes for each value and separating them with commas. After completing all fields, click the Save button to save the table. Now you can see the users table with the configured columns. Next, we'll write code to connect our project to the newly created database. First, create a new file. Click New File and name it config.php. Here, we'll establish a connection to the database using PHP. We've defined several variables to configure the MySQL database connection. Host stores the database server address. In this example, we use localhost, indicating the database server is on the same machine as our PHP project. User stores the username with access to MySQL, which is typically root by default. Password stores the MySQL user's password. Since we are using a local setup, this is left empty, meaning no password is required. Database stores the name of the database to be accessed, which in this case is users_db. Next, the con variable is defined to store the database connection object. We use new MySQLi, which creates a new object from the MySQLi class. This object automatically attempts to connect to the database using the specified values. Once the connection is established, we check for any connection errors using the connect error property of the con object. If an error occurs, the program halts execution using the die function and displays a message, connection failed, followed by the error description retrieved from the connect error property. If the connection is successful, the program proceeds without displaying anything. Next, we will add the method attribute to each form element. Now let's move to the index.php file. We will add the method attribute with the value post to the login and register form elements. This is one way to send form data to the server. For the destination location of the form data submission, we will set it in the action attribute, which will point to a file named login_register.php. Additionally, for the registration form, the data from the form will also be sent to the login_register.php file for processing. Since we don't currently have a login_register.php file, we will create it first. Click New File, then name the file login_register.php. This file will serve as the destination for the form data submission, and we will add logic to process the data received from the form. Now, let's start by creating a condition for handling the registration process. First, we call the session start function. This function is used to start a PHP session, which allows us to store certain data that can be accessed across pages during the user's session. Then we use require once to import the config.php file, which contains the configuration for connecting to the MySQL database. We check whether the register button has been clicked using the isSet function. This function is used to check whether a variable has been set or not. In this case, we check for the existence of data from the register button through the $_post superglobal array, which is used to retrieve data sent via the post method on an HTML form. Next, we define several variables. Name, email, password, and role store the input data received from the HTML form. Password stores the password data, encrypted using the password hash function with the password default algorithm. This ensures that the password is securely stored in the database. The check email variable is used to store the result of an SQL query executed using the query method of the con object. This query checks whether an email is already registered in the user's table. If numRows is greater than 0, it means the email is already registered. We store an error message in the session with the key register_error. Later, we will use this session to display the error message in the registration form. Additionally, we store the active form status in the session with the key active_form, so the page will continue to display the registration form when showing the error message. If the email is not registered, we add the new user's data to the user's table using an insert query. Finally, we use the header function to redirect the user back to the main page after the process is complete. This will display the login form again. We also stop script execution after redirecting the user to the main page using the exit function. This ensures no further code runs after the redirect. Next, we will create another condition to handle the login process. Here, we check whether the login button has been clicked using the isSet function as well. We then define several variables. The email variable is used to store the email data. The password variable is used to store the password data entered by the user. The result variable stores the result of an SQL query to find a user based on the email in the user's table. If the email is found, we retrieve the user's data from the query result using the fetchAssociation method. Then we use the password verify function to check whether the entered password matches the encrypted password in the database. If the password matches, sessions with the keys name and email are set to store the user's name and email. If the user's role is admin, they are redirected to admin_page.php. Otherwise, they are redirected to user_page.php. We also stop script execution after redirecting the user to the admin or user page using the exit function. If the email is not found or the password is incorrect, we store an error message in the login error session and also store the active form status in the active form session. Then we redirect the user to the main page, index.php. We also stop script execution Next, we move to the index.php file to display error messages and set the active status for the login or register form based on the data stored in the session. First, we need to call the session start function to start or continue an active session. This step is necessary so that we can access the session data stored. Then we define an array named errors. This array stores error messages that occur during the login or registration process. This data is retrieved from the session. If there are no stored errors, it will be filled with an empty string using the null coalescing operator. Next, we create a variable called activeForm. This variable is used to determine which form is active, login or register. This value is also taken from session with the default value as the string login. The purpose is so that the page can display the appropriate form based on the last status. After that, we call the session unset function. This function is used to remove all existing session variables. However, the session itself remains active. Next, we define a function called shower. This function accepts one parameter called error and returns an HTML element containing the error message if error is not empty. In other words, this function is used to display error messages on the form. Finally, we create a function called isActiveForm that accepts two parameters, form name and active form. This function checks whether the given form name matches the active form. If it does, it will return the string active, which is used to add a class to the HTML element. In the login form, we then call the shower function. This is intended to display login error messages if there are errors stored in the session. This function accepts an argument value in the form of an error message. This value is taken from the errors array element with the key login. And if there are login-related errors, the error message will be displayed within the HTML element. Then in the register form section, we also call the shower function again, but this time taking the error message from the errors array element with the key register. This is used to display error messages when the registration process fails. Next, we remove the active class on the login form and replace it by calling the isActiveForm function to add the active class to the HTML element based on the condition we have previously created. This function accepts two arguments, a string representing the form name, here named login, which will be used as the value of the form name parameter, and the active form variable, which contains the name of the active form, either taken from the session or set as a default value login. This function checks whether form name matches active form. If yes, then the string active will be returned, and the element will receive the active class. This active class is used to display the appropriate form to the user. However, if form name does not match active form, then an empty string will be returned. Finally, we call the isActiveForm function again to add the active class to the register form. It works the same way as it does for the login form, only this time it is applied to the HTML element of the register form. Then we will provide a little styling for elements with the error message class. We add the following CSS properties: padding 12 pixels to add space inside the element so that the text is more comfortable to read, background to give a pink background to indicate an error, border radius 6 pixels to make the corners of the element rounded and look more aesthetic, font size 16 pixels to define a text size that is comfortable to read, color to give dark red text color to contrast with the background, text align center to centerline the text horizontally, and margin bottom 20 pixels to provide space between this element and the next element. Finally, before we see the results, we will create files for the admin and user pages. First, for the user page, we create a file named user_page.php. Then for the admin page, we create a file named admin_page.php. For now, we leave both files empty. Now let's see the results. First, we will try registering. Here, we will choose a role as a user. When the register button is clicked, we will be directly redirected to the login page or form to proceed with the login process. This indicates that the registration process has been successfully completed. Next, let's check the database. In the database, we can see that an ID has been automatically generated. Additionally, data such as name, email, encrypted password, and role as a user has been successfully added to the database. If we try to register with the same email, an error message will appear with the text, "Email is already registered." This message indicates that the email has already been used to register. However, if we register with a different email, for example, like this, and choose the role as an admin, then after clicking the register button, the new data will be successfully added to the database with a different email and the role as an admin. After registering, let's test the login process using both accounts with different roles, namely as a user and admin. If we enter incorrect login data and click the login button, an error message will appear with the text, "Incorrect email or password." Conversely, if the data entered is correct, the login process will succeed. For an account with the role of a user, after logging in, we will be directed to the user_page.php page. This indicates that logging in as a user has been successful. Then if we try to log in with an account that has the role of an admin, we will be directed to the admin_page.php page. On both the admin and user pages, we will add an HTML element to display the name of the currently logged in user. In addition, we will also create a logout button so that users can easily log out of their accounts. First, we will create the basic HTML structure for this admin page. The way to do it is to type an exclamation mark, then press the Tab key. This will automatically generate the basic HTML structure. Change the text in the title tag to admin page. After that, link this file to the CSS file we already have for styling. Now we will add some HTML elements inside the body tag. These elements are just simple examples for the admin page. You are free to adjust them so that the admin and user pages look more appealing according to your needs. After that, we will add PHP code on top of this HTML structure. The first step is to call the session start function to start a session. Then we check whether the user is logged in or not. Here, we will use the email as the key for verification. If the user's email key is not found in the session, or in other words, if the user is not logged in, then we will redirect them to the index.php page using the header function. This step ensures that the user must log in first before accessing the admin or user page. And don't forget to add the exit function to stop further script execution. If the verification is successful and the user is logged in, we can display the name of the logged in user inside this span element. This name is taken directly from the session. Next, we will add the onClick attribute to this logout button element to redirect to the logout.php file. This logout.php file will later handle the process of ending the user session and redirecting back to the login page. But before we create the logout file, add one CSS property for the body element so that the background color changes to white. Now we will create the logout.php file. Click New File again. Name it logout.php. In this logout file, we will create a function to handle the user logout process. First, we need to call the session start function to start or continue the active session. This step is necessary so that we can access the session data stored. After that, we use the session unset function. This function works to delete all session variables. Thus, all temporary data, such as user login information, will be removed from the session. Next, we use the session destroy function. This function serves to terminate the active session and delete all session data from the server. With this step, the session is completely ended, so the user is no longer considered logged in. After the session is deleted, the user will be redirected to the index.php page using a header redirect. This page is to display the login form, allowing the user to log in again if needed. Finally, we call the exit function. This function ensures that script execution completely stops after the redirect process, so no additional code is executed. Then for this user page, we can copy all the code on the admin page and paste it here. Then change the text in the title tag to user page, and change the text in this span element to user. Next, before we see the results, we will provide styling for the elements in the body of the user and admin pages to make them look a bit tidy. Let's go to the CSS file. We start by adding properties for the H1 or heading element. Font size 50 pixels to set the text size of the element larger so that it stands out more on the page. Next, for the span element, color to give color to the text in the span element. Next, for paragraph element within the box class, font size with a value of 22 pixels to set the text size of the paragraph. And finally, we style the button element inside the element with the box class. Display block to make the button element a full block, with 300 pixels to set the button's width to 300 pixels, and margin 0 auto, so the button is horizontally centered. Now let's see the results directly. First, we will try logging in as a user. After successfully logging in, we will be redirected to the user page because we are using an account with the user role. On this page, the name of the logged-in user will be clearly displayed. In addition, there is a logout button that we can use to log out of the account. When this logout button is clicked, we will log out of the account and automatically be redirected back to the login form. This process also deletes all user session data from the server, ensuring account security. Next, we will try logging in using an admin account. After successfully logging in, we will be redirected to the admin page, according to the role of the account used. Just like on a user account, the name of the logged-in user will also be displayed here. If we click the Log Out button, we will log out of the admin account and return to the login form. Now let's test the system security. If we try to directly access the admin page via the URL without logging in first, the system will deny access and automatically redirect us back to the login form page. This ensures that only logged-in users can access certain pages. The same applies if we try to access the user page directly without logging in. The system will deny access and ask us to log in first. At the end, we have successfully completed the creation of a full-stack login and register form with user and admin pages using HTML, CSS, PHP, and MySQL database. I hope this video can provide insights and benefits for you. If there are any questions or things that are unclear, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the Codehal channel so you won't miss various other interesting content about coding and web development. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch. See you in the next video.